Okay, what's going on, everybody? We are here. We're live. I want to thank you all for joining me today. If you can see and hear me clearly, please drop a one in the live chat, and then we can get today's stream started. And as I'm waiting for the ones to come into the live chat, if you haven't already, please make sure you hit the like button because that is the most important thing you can do for me on this channel. What that does is that it helps to make sure that those who are subscribed to the channel will get their notifications, and it also helps to push this video through the YouTube algorithm. Secondly, if you're new to the channel, or maybe you've been ghost watching the channel for quite some time now, please make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit the bell notification next to the subscribe button so you can be notified whenever I release a new video. And lastly, please make sure you share this video out on your social media platforms as well, to let everyone know that I'm currently live, and to also help push this video in the YouTube algorithm. And lastly, follow me on Telegram at TD Media Group. The link is pinned in the live chat. It's in the description box below, and it will also be pinned in the comment section. I think I messed up the first part of that. So if I'm brain farting, but if I didn't say it correctly the first time, hit the like button so people will get their notifications. Anyways, now that the introduction is out the way, let's get into today's show. Let's get into it. What I want to first start out with, and today we're going to head back over to Chicago. We're going to head to Chicago. And I want to first start out with this. There was a point that I wanted to make not too long ago in regards to this report from Chicago.gov, right? This is from the local governing body of Chicago. And when I brought this up, I wanted to make a point concerning the demographics of those who are asylum seekers in Chicago. Now, for many of you who may know this already, some of you may not know this already, depending on how long you've been, following me on this channel. This was a report that came out from the local governing body of Chicago, right? Chicago.gov. And it's discussing its homeless population. Now, as of now, and I'm sure from now until forever, right? Chicago has now made two classes of homeless people in Chicago. There's two classes of homelessness. There are asylum seekers and non-asylum seekers. Asylum seekers are here in the green. Non-asylum seekers are in the blue. Non-asylum seekers are obviously Chicago citizens, right? Asylum seekers are those who cross the border illegally, those who I like to call Biden's migrants, right? I want to get into some data concerning the demographics of those asylum seekers, who they are, and their age. One of the things that I've said multiple times, and a lot of people say this when discussing, the migrant crisis, we talk about how it's majority single males that are crossing the border. It's majority young single males crossing the border. You're sold on this idea and this thought that these are all a bunch of just families and women and children, and they use that to tug on your heartstrings. But the reality is that these are a bunch of men, not even relatively, young men at that, right? That are coming into your cities, into your neighborhoods, and into your states. And I want to get into that right now just to prove that point. So let me zoom in a little bit closer so you can see this better. Okay. Looks like I zoomed in a little bit too much, but let's come out just a little bit. That should be good enough. So as you can see here, it states, let me zoom just a little bit more. Okay, good enough. So as you can see here, where it says asylum seekers, race and ethnicity of asylum seekers. These are the race and ethnicity of asylum seekers in Chicago. 97.8% Latino. And this is important as we move forward into the main topic of today's discussion, right? So asylum seekers, race and ethnicity, 97.8% Latino. Got that? Okay, good. Gender of asylum seekers, 79.1% male, 20% female, and 0.1% T people, right? But let's stay there on the 79.1% male. This adds to the fact, and it proves the point that so many of us have been making, is that it's majority men that are crossing the border. It's majority men that are in these shelters, right? But they sell you on this whole fairy tale surrounding women and children. Now, mind you, I'm not saying that there are no women and children in these shelters and that there are no women and children crossing the borders. Obviously, we know that to be true. When I was in Chicago, for Christmas. I spent my first Christmas back home in Chicago for the first time in like 10 years. I went with my family, me and my son, my wife, and whatnot, right? And my wife wanted to go downtown because she always likes to go downtown. If it was up to me, we would just sit up in my parents' house all day and I'd watch ESPN with my dad, right? But my wife always wants to go downtown. And when we went downtown, I can tell you with my own eyes, there were a lot of women and children on the streets. And it was something, I'm not going to lie to you all, to see it in real time, it was definitely jarring. It was definitely jarring to be there in the winter. It was pretty cold, and to see them just outside downtown, right? So I'm not denying that they exist. That's not the argument. The argument and the issue is that the media keeps selling you on this sob story about women and children. But the reality is that it's 80%, almost 80% men, as you can see here in Chicago, that's crossing the border and coming into the country and then coming to Chicago. 80% men. And out of that 80%, 79.1% to be exact, age of asylum seekers. Under 18, 15.1%. 18 to 24, 18.3%. 25 to 34 years of age, 42.7%. 42.7%. 35 to 44, 18.8%. So one of the things that people love to say, and that you hear over and over again, and I hear this a lot on social media, is that these are military-aged men crossing the border. These are military-aged men crossing the border. They are. It's true. And here's the data that proves that here in Chicago. It is overwhelmingly majority military-aged young men, 79.1% to be exact, with 42.7%, almost half of them being aged 25 to 34. So I just wanted to prove that point, because that's something that, we state all the time. People like me state all the time. I state all the time, but I've never shown the data to actually prove that point. And I like to prove the things that I say are true when the opportunity presents itself. So you all know that I'm not just talking out of the side of my neck, right? When I say something, it's true. It's definitely true. Now, what I want to do is that I want to move over into the meat of today's discussion. That's what I'd like to do. I want to move over into the meat of today's discussion, because what I want to touch on is the fact that as we speak, literally thousands of Biden's migrants are being permanently housed all throughout the city of Chicago as we speak. Not a few, not a couple hundred, thousands, and quickly, really fast. As you can see here, that's the title of the Chicago Tribune article. It's titled, "City and State Quickly Moves Thousands of Biden's Migrants from Shelters into Homes Across the South and West Side of Chicago. But will they stay? Question mark. Of course they will." And shout out to the South and West Side of Chicago. Got them all in your neighborhood, huh? We're going to touch on that in a moment. But before we get too deep into this article, I just want to show you very quickly a few photos, if I may, from this article, just so we can see the living conditions that Biden's migrants are living under on the South and West Side of Chicago, right? Shout out to the West Side where Brandon Johnson is from. The migrants are living good in your neighborhood. Brandon Johnson, they're living good on the West Side over there where you're from. Before we do that, thank you very much, Jenny Lamb, for being the first person to contribute to today's stream. I appreciate your support, Jenny Lamb. Jenny Lamb stated, catching up with my TD report, supporting the channel. I appreciate you, Jenny, for your support and all the support that you all show me on this channel. I deeply appreciate it. And it does not go unnoticed and is definitely needed. And shout out to Sierra Reese. Sierra Reese became a new channel member. Thank you very much. I appreciate you, Sierra. Thank you so much. Now, what I want to do before we dive into this article, I want to get into a few photos from this article. So that we can see how Biden's migrants are living on the south and west side of Chicago. Let's see how they're living. Isn't that nice? She living good. She's so happy. Look at that nice house that she's in. Brand new paint job, all new furniture, all on the house. Courtesy of Brandon Johnson and JB Pritzker. She is so happy. I'd be happy too. If I was moving into a nice place like that on the south and west side of Chicago, I'd be thrilled. Wow. Look at that nice place. Look at all that space, all that room, new furniture, beautiful home, hardwood floors. Oh my goodness. Such a beautiful home. Biden's migrants are living so amazing on the south and west side of Chicago. And look at this. My man is just sitting there in disbelief, like, man, I can't believe I made it. Crossed the border illegally, participated in this asylum fraud, got away with it as long as Biden's in office. And look at me in this big old house. I can't believe I made it. That's that look. That's that look and that pose when you made it. And you can't believe it. After all this time and after all these years, I made it. Now, in my Rob voice, in my Blacklight Revelations voice, shout out to my big homie Rob right there, Blacklight Revelations. Now, if I may quote Rob, here's my question. Okay, here's my question. After seeing all those photos, and I'm talking to the men and women of Chicago on the south and west side of Chicago, how you doing? Isn't that what Wendy Williams used to say? I think that was Wendy Williams, right? How you doing? How you doing over there? That's what I'm trying to figure out. I'm trying to figure out on the south and west side of Chicago, how you doing? Because they doing good on the south and west side of Chicago. Biden's migrants are doing great. These homes are beautiful, permanently housed by the thousands. And I'm just trying to figure out how you doing. That's what I'm trying to figure out, honestly. How you doing? Now, before we get into how you doing and my assumptions of how you doing, I want to get into this article for a little bit, just more detail concerning just what's going on right now in the city of Chicago and how they're fast tracking all of Biden's migrants into these new homes on the south and west side. Meanwhile, Chicago citizens, the Chicago citizen homeless population, you're just still on the street. Go figure. Shout out to Cutthroat Nash. I appreciate you, brother, for always coming through. Oh, they're moving on up. The Jeffersons, yes, they are, Cutthroat Nash. They are moving on up. And isn't it beautiful? They are moving on up. It's such a beautiful thing. It is such a beautiful thing. I'm happy for these folks. They came up. Aren't you all happy? I am. Y'all just hating. Y'all just hating. But let's get into this article. And Cutthroat Nash doubled down. I appreciate you, brother. Do they get free cable with Telemundo? I don't know if they get free cable. I wouldn't be surprised. They just might be getting free cable, Cutthroat Nash. And for those of you who have always wondered, you probably haven't wondered, but I always got to give credit where credit is due. You all know how I always refer to New York City, or I've been referring to New York City as Gotham City, and the only one that can help New York now is Batman. I got that from Cutthroat Nash. That was a comment that Cutthroat Nash left. So that's the last time I'm gonna give you credit, brother. I can't keep shouting you out like that every time I say it, but I gave you your credit publicly and I appreciate your support. Let's jump into this article now. Let's get into this, okay? I'm never gonna give you that credit again, brother, just to let you know. But let's jump into this article so we can see how they doing in Chicago. Migrants across the city are leaving shelters in droves. They're leaving shelters in droves. Their belongings stuffed in trash bags. They loaded into Ubers or Lyfts, which they've often arranged themselves, headed to new homes. It sounded almost bleak at first, right? They started this article off. It almost sounded kind of bleak. Migrants across the city are leaving shelters in droves. Sounding like, oh man, are they being evicted? They being kicked out? Their belongings stuffed in trash bags that they've loaded into Ubers and Lyfts. Oh my God, they don't even have suitcases? Man, that's rough. Which they've often arranged themselves. They have to arrange their own luggage? Now that's crazy. To head to new homes. Oh, never mind. They're going to new homes. New homes courtesy of Brandon Johnson and JB Pritzker. They're headed to new homes. I thought things were sounding bleak. I guess not. Things are actually sounding on the up and up. Like Cutthroat Nash said, moving on up to the south side and the west side. More than 8 months after state and city leaders said they wanted to help thousands of migrants find homes in Chicago, the government assistance program covering their initial month's rent is moving faster than ever. Oh, I'm glad to see the city of Chicago moving so quickly to house all of Biden's migrants. That's amazing. Migrants are now mostly settling on the south and west side of Chicago. I want to stop right there for a moment. Shout out to all my people on the south and west side of Chicago. I want to stop right there for a moment. How many of you all remember? Also, there are 264 of you in the live stream right now. Please hit the like button if you haven't already. That is extremely important. But how many of you all remember when the shelters were first getting placed in your neighborhood? You all remember that? Do you all remember when the shelters were first being placed in your neighborhoods on the south and west side of Chicago? All right. When they were first being placed in your neighborhoods, they told you, right? And they swore up and down, your local city officials, that the shelters were going to be temporary. That's what they said, right? I remember we covered this, months ago, almost a year ago now at this point. These shelters were supposed to be temporary. And they were. So Brandon Johnson didn't lie to you. But what Brandon Johnson didn't tell you is that they were going to phase out the shelters and move them into homes permanently in your neighborhood. That's what Brandon Johnson didn't tell you. That's what Governor JB Pritzker didn't tell you. They didn't tell you that. They just told you that the shelters were going to be there temporarily, and then they would move on. Well, it looks like they didn't move on. Well, I guess technically they did. They moved out and into new homes in your neighborhood. New homes that you don't even have access to, that you didn't have access to. But they gave it to Biden's migrants swiftly and quickly. Meanwhile, you're stuck struggling in, whatever one bedroom you live in. No disrespect. Listen, I'm stuck struggling in a one bedroom here in Los Angeles. Okay. So we're in the same boat. We're in the same boat. I'm hating too. I'm definitely hating too. Believe me when I tell you, I'm a hater. I'm definitely a hater. Let's get back into this. Let me zoom in a little bit more. I feel like that's way too small, so you guys can read this along with me. So let's start this over, at least this part right here that's in blue. Migrants are now mostly settling on the south and west side of Chicago, where they say the rent is more affordable with the approximate $1,500 a month rental assistance they say they receive from the state. So they get a new home and the rent is covered. It's a beautiful thing. Beautiful thing. If you're an illegal immigrant, beautiful thing. The state has spent $41.4 million so far to resettle more than 5,000 households, according to Illinois' Department of Human Services. I'm curious, within the time period that they have resettled 5,000 of Biden's migrants in homes, beautiful homes, by the way, as we saw throughout the south and west side of Chicago, I'm curious as to how many homeless citizens in Chicago have they housed in that same time period? How many of them have they housed? I'm just asking a question. I don't know what the answer is. I'm just asking a question. I'm curious. What do you guys think? Let me know in the live chat. We see that 5,000 of migrants of Biden's migrants have been housed permanently on the south and west side of Chicago. Let me know in the live chat right now. How many of you all think? How many citizens that are homeless in Chicago do you think have been housed in that same time period? I'm curious to what you think. Let's keep going. Meanwhile, community leaders and advocates wonder about the long-term effect it will have on the neighborhoods they are moving into. I wonder what the long-term effects are. Well, that's an easy one. The long-term effects is that you're going to be displaced. That's what the long-term effects are. The long-term effects is that Biden's migrants, while living in your neighborhood, because they've been permanently housed in your neighborhood and their rent is covered, courtesy of J.B. Pritzker and Brandon Johnson, Biden's migrants, their children, they're going to have children while living in your neighborhood. And though at the time of the 2030 census, when it's time for them to take that, though Biden's migrants may not be counted on a census, their children will be. So then what that means is when it's time to redistrict the Chicago map after 2030, what used to be a Black district or a Black ward will now be a Hispanic one. That's what that means. That's exactly what that means. And if somebody like me with no education can figure that out, if somebody like me that's, a Russian bot powered by artificial intelligence and ChatGPT created to push misinformation on YouTube, if I'm able to figure that out, you think that they don't know that? Do you think that Brandon Johnson doesn't understand that? Do you think J.B. Pritzker doesn't understand that? Do you think the local governing body of Chicago does not understand that? Do you think your city councilmen don't understand that? Am I really that smart? I'm not. I'm really not. It's just common sense that that's what's going to happen. Because I covered at the top of this decade, you can say now, in 2021, the battle in Chicago over redistricting the wards in Chicago between the Congressional Hispanic Caucus and the Congressional Black Caucus of Chicago. That is not national, but the Congressional Hispanic Caucus of Chicago and the Congressional Black Caucus of Chicago. I chronicled that battle that they had between redistricting Chicago, in which the Hispanic Caucus wanted to redistrict the map to take more wards and to take more territory. Long story short, the Congressional Black Caucus won. It's long story short, they won, but they only won because the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, they bowed out. They figured that, it's not worth all this headache right now. It's just to gain very little ground, right? We'll just wait for the 2030 census to come out. And when the new numbers are out, that Hispanics now outnumber Black Americans in Chicago by a relatively significant margin, right? Significant meaning like 5%. To me, that's significant, 5%. Now, when we redistrict the maps, we're playing for keeps and we're taking everything. But remember, and keep this on your mind for a moment. At the time in early 2021, none of us were even thinking about migrant crisis. It was happening, but it wasn't mainstream news. So it wasn't something that everybody was talking about. So even for me at the time, when I made the videos speaking on that, I was just speaking on the natural progression of things as it pertains to just population growth, right? Concerning, Black Americans, Hispanics, white Americans, and whatnot. And as it pertains to natural population growth, the Hispanic population grows rather quickly because realistically, it's not a natural growth. You have illegal immigrants coming in, they're having babies, and it's not natural per se. But when you factor in Biden's migrant crisis, and now you have all these imported so-called migrants coming into your community and popping out kids, this then accelerates everything that I said was going to happen in early 2021. It accelerates it and amplifies it times 10. So like I said, once 2030 comes around, forget about it. That ward, that district that used to be a Black water district is now a Hispanic water district. That's what's going to happen. So when they're saying community leaders and advocates wonder about the long-term effects and what it will have on the neighborhoods that they're moving into, those are the effects. Those are the effects. And if J.B. Pritzker has it his way, and Brandon Johnson as well, but this is mainly something, in my opinion, what I'm going to say now, something that I believe J.B. Pritzker is going to be pushing along. And I've been putting this on Brandon Johnson, but it's really J.B. Pritzker. You have all of Biden's migrants moving into your neighborhoods permanently on the south and west side of Chicago. And when J.B. Pritzker puts in place non-citizen voting, forget about it. It's over. You don't even have to redistrict awards anymore. Non-citizen voting will knock you out the box right there. Non-citizen voting is going to knock you out the box right there. I want you to look at how wicked the Democratic Party is in relation to the Black community. Look at how wicked they are. They're placing Biden's migrants all in your neighborhoods just so they can eventually, and they will, mark my words, they will put in place non-citizen voting in local elections, to which your vote now in the city is inconsequential at that point. Means nothing. It's been drowned out. And by 2030, once again, what was once a Black ward, what was once a Black district, will now be a Hispanic ward or Hispanic district. It's over. Courtesy of the Democratic Party. Courtesy of Brandon Johnson and J.B. Pritzker. Right? Now, I want to play a video very quickly of Brandon Johnson, who was asked that very question. He was asked a question about how he feels about non-citizen voting. Some of you may remember this video. I played this a while back ago. I believe this was before he won the election for mayor. At the time, he was still running. For mayor. And he was asked whether or not he supported non-citizen voting. And as usual, with any typical question that you ask Brandon Johnson in typical fashion, he talks in circles, he talks in circles. So what I want to do is play that video for you right now. I want to put that on for you. Let's listen to what Brandon Johnson have to say. And you let me know whether or not Brandon Johnson answered the question as it pertains to whether or not he supports non-citizen voting in Chicago. You all let me know whether or not he answered the question. There are 333 of you in the stream right now. Please hit the like button if you haven't already. That is extremely important in the growth of this channel. Thank you very much. And thank you very much, Jenny Lamb, for doubling down. Thank you very much, Jenny Lamb, for coming through once again. In those areas, you don't even need ID verification to vote. We are already done. You don't even need ID verification to vote. What's interesting about that, Jenny Lamb, if that's true, I mean, I'm not calling you a liar or anything like that, but I personally don't know that for a fact. I have to verify that myself. But if that's true, that's insane. It's crazy that in those areas, as you say, they don't need ID verification to vote, right? You don't need that, but you need ID verification to get into a city council meeting. I don't know how that works, That was a new change by way of Brandon Johnson, to make it significantly more difficult. There are other hurdles that he put in the way as well. I'm not going to go through all that right now. I've gone through it a lot of times, and I don't want to extend the live stream out any longer than it needs to be. But he put in a whole bunch of hurdles to make it very difficult, right? More difficult for Chicago citizens to get into city council meetings. It is more difficult for a citizen of Chicago to get into a city council meeting than it is for an illegal immigrant to cross the border at this moment in time, courtesy of Brandon Johnson. You need an ID to get into the city council meeting, but you don't need an ID to vote? That's crazy. That's crazy. And shout out to Casted Crown. Casted Crown said, how do I contact you? I'm Danielle, where are you at? Danielle's been asking me that question for quite some time now. You can send me a DM on Instagram at TD Media Group, and eventually I'm going to get you guys that email as well. I'm going to try to do it as quickly as possible. I see Danielle's not in here because you got tired of me saying that lie, right? But let me play this video right now. That's enough of me playing around. But thank you, though. I don't want to just disregard your support. Thank you very much, Casted Crown. And I will give you guys information on how to contact me more directly than social media.
What is your position on the right of undocumented immigrants to vote in municipal elections?
So my position is, pretty straightforward. Honestly, it's standard. There are certain rights that come with citizenship, and I believe those rights still should be protected. And so, I do certainly agree that families who are, seeking refuge or just opportunity here in America, that there should be a pathway to citizenship. Like, I'm not mad at that, right? And I also recognize that, our democracy, for better or worse, was designed to provide like enfranchisement to individuals, of course, who have, the legal presentation of being here. I think that should be maintained. Now, as far as, undocumented families having some say-so in the direction of our public schools, I think that's worth figuring out. You know what I'm saying? I mean, you're dropping your kids off. I don't believe that families, should be shut out of the ability to have influence. And it's why we fought for democracy, right? Because in Chicago, Maze, when you met me, one of the things that I was pushing for is for an elected representative school board. I organized all over the city of Chicago to bring that into fruition, and then had to lobby in Springfield and challenge some of my own friends who were being skittish about it. So I believe in the expansion of democracy. And in fact, at a time in which democracy is actually being eroded and voting rights are being curtailed and stuffed, we were able to actually expand that. That's the leadership that I bring to the city of Chicago. And I'm prepared to bring that once I'm mayor of Chicago. The disenfranchisement of our people, through keeping us out of the ability to influence our children's education.
Now the disenfranchisement of our people, he's talking about Black Americans. Now he's conflating, and they do this all the time. Now he's conflating the apparent woes of illegal immigrants. The apparent woes, they're not really woes because you crossed the border illegally. So, I mean, you're not a citizen. There are no woes, right? But the woes that they would like to have you believe that they're experiencing, which they're not, but that they would like you to believe, he's now conflating them with Black American history. That's what he's doing right now. He's conflating the two. They're using that intersectionality magic that Democrats like to do, where we're all the same. Everybody's quote struggle is one and the same, and we're all connected. Doesn't matter what gender you are, doesn't matter your sexual preference. None of those things matter. It's all the same. Black, Hispanic, white, Asian, illegal, citizen. It's irrelevant. It's all the same. It's all one big history. It's all one big melting pot. That conflation is actually extremely disrespectful. But carry on, Brandon. Carry on. Let me rewind it back just a little bit.
And stuffed. We were able to actually expand that. That's the leadership that I bring to the city of Chicago, and I'm prepared to bring that once I'm mayor of Chicago. The disenfranchisement of our people, through keeping us out of the ability to influence our children's education. The fact that we've criminalized poverty, and that has had a real awful stain on Black men in particular. Like we have to continue to find real ways in which we, enfranchise people who have been marginalized by this, really, really jacked up system.
What does any of that he said and that, how long did he speak? He spoke for 2 minutes and 13 seconds. What did any of that have to do with whether or not he supports non-citizen voting? He didn't answer the question. He didn't answer the question at all. He talked around in circles for almost 2.5 minutes, saying a whole lot of nothing. A whole lot of nothing. And in closing, when you really think about how disrespectful all this is to the citizens of Chicago, when you think about how disrespectful it all is, really let this sit on your mind for a moment as we close out. You have to wait. The citizens of Chicago, those of you who are homeless, right? Non-asylum seekers, as you're categorized now, right? Because the homeless population has been split in two: asylum seekers and non-asylum seekers, right? Those of you who are non-asylum seekers, the citizen population of Chicago, how disrespectful is it that they have to wait on a vote on the Bring Chicago Home initiative? I believe it's March 19th is when the election is in Chicago. Let this sit on your mind. Chicago citizens have to wait. The citizen homeless population has to wait on a vote for the city to decide, for Brandon Johnson to decide whether or not he's going to house you. You have to wait on a vote. But Biden's migrants get fast-tracked into homes in your neighborhood while you have to wait for a vote that the people may or may not vote for. And though I'm out here all the way in, Los Angeles, I don't live in Chicago, right? I will tell you this: if I lived in Chicago, I'd be voting no on that Bring Chicago Home initiative, because I know, as you all know, because we've discussed this, and it's just common sense, that what Brandon Johnson is going to do is he's going to take that money to house asylum seekers, air quotes, right? That's what he's going to do. He's going to take that money to house Biden's migrants. It's not going to go to you. There is no addendum in the Bring Chicago Home initiative that says it's for citizens only. We discussed this numerous times already. He's going to use that money to house migrants, homeless migrants, so-called asylum seekers. That's what he's going to do. But once again, meanwhile, you have to wait for a vote. And look at how janky all this is concerning that bill. It's so up and down. Look at the disrespect is crazy. Judge invalidates Bring Chicago Home referendum on March 19 ballot. So it got invalidated, meaning that it's illegal. You can't, even if you voted for it and it won, he can't put it into law. It's not something that he can actually, write out as policy, right? And then you see here, Bring Chicago Home will stay on the ballot after city's appeal. So Brandon Johnson appealed the decision that was handed down by the judge that invalidated the Bring Chicago Home referendum, but it stayed on the ballot, right? So now he has you out here voting for something that judges have already deemed is illegal, essentially. You can't do that, but go vote for this anyways, right? And then you have here, what does it state here? Real estate groups appeal Bring Chicago Home ruling to Illinois Supreme Court. Let's check this out very quickly, because this is actually relatively new. I just came across this. A coalition of real estate business groups that have vehemently opposed the Bring Chicago Home referendum are asking their case, or a referendum, are taking their case to Illinois' highest court. The Building Owners and Managers Association of Chicago and several other groups filed an appeal Monday with the Illinois Supreme Court in hopes of reversing a recent appellate court decision that keeps votes being counted on the referendum question. So what's happening here is that even though Brandon Johnson has appealed the ruling that invalidated the Bring Chicago Home initiative. While that's going through its appeal process, you can still vote for it, even though you don't know what's going to happen with it, after the election until the judge makes a final decision. But what we have here are real estate groups that are taking it to the Supreme Court so that those votes can't even be counted for. I mean, just look at all of the foolishness that's coming along with this. Why is it easy for the city of Chicago and the state of Illinois, Brandon Johnson and J.B. Pritzker, why is it so easy and so simple for them to be able to house Biden's migrants? But it's this whole ridiculous, nonsensical process to house Chicago citizens. Why is that? You shouldn't even have to be dealing with it. It should be the other way around. You, the citizens of Chicago, those of you on the South and West side, you should be the ones that are being fast-tracked into these homes. You are the ones that should be getting fast-tracked with the rental assistance, right? Those of you who need it, those of you who are homeless, that should be you. And it should be the other way around, where Biden's migrants who cross the border illegally, they should be the ones that, you got to wait. You got to wait. We'll get to you when we get to you. I don't know. The referendum's being appealed right now. It's on the ballot. It's off the ballot. The votes count. The votes don't count. I don't know what to tell you. But in the meantime, we're putting the citizens of the South and West side into homes with rental assistance for those who need it. But in fact, it's the other way around. You have to wait. Citizens have to wait, while Biden's migrants live the American dream. And with all that being said, that does it for today's stream. So I want to thank you all for joining me today. I think that rhymed, didn't it? That sounded great. So I want to thank you all for joining me this evening. Shout out to Tobias Judah. Tobias Judah stated, "Thanks, TD, for covering the illegals. What happens when Trump stop funding?" I'm not sure what that question means. What happens when Trump stop funding? My apologies, Tobias. I'm not sure what you mean by that question. I'm not sure what you mean by that, but I do thank you for supporting the channel, and I thank you all who supported today's stream. So with all that being said, thank you all for joining me this evening. Please hit the like button on your way out. Subscribe to the channel if you're new to the channel, and share this video out on your social media platforms. And also, the new most important thing that you can do for me is please follow me on Telegram at TD Media Group. The link is pinned in the live chat above. It is in the description box below, and it will be pinned in the comment section after this stream ends. So thank you all for your time, and until the next live stream, have a great evening and a safe one. Peace.